Today is the 7th of November 2019, and it's around about 8 o'clock in the evening in the UK. And we have present Marybeth and Peter and myself, Rick or Richard. And so we are here to talk on the next in our series of fun talks that we are enjoying. And the topic for this evening is effortless abundance. So I don't know if either of you two have any other comments you want to help just launch us, get us in before I get started, because this has been an old topic of mine.
I can just see your excitement around it. I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say.
Likewise. Dive in.
Okay. Well, effortless abundance, I for me, started it's probably about 14 years ago when I was starting to focus on that. I'd gone through a period where certain things had all sort of finished. My prior marriage had finished. One of the companies I was involved with had finished. And I was looking at really what I wanted from life. And I thought, one thing that I'd really enjoy in life and feels to me as though it should be more natural would be abundance. And I've spent a good deal of time working from a spiritual perspective. And some of the arguments and working on through some of the many spiritual disciplines that I've had is, well, once you crack things from a spiritual perspective, then of course money's going to all flow easily. And so I spent a lot of money on different spiritual practices, but it didn't seem to work that way to me. It did not flow more easily because of the spiritual work. And when I looked at the spiritual people, those people who were engaged with spirituality, guess what? There weren't very many of them that were actually financially successful. There's a lack of finance there. So I began to define abundance, but then also abundance often has been connected with endless hours of work. So so you have your abundance, but now you have to work an 80-hour week or something to get this. I've done my 80-hour work weeks and so forth. I've done a good deal of that in the past as well. But it seemed to me, when I looked at nature and the way that nature worked, that nature creates this incredible abundance. And it's a natural state of affairs. From a cultivator's course that Marybeth and I have been working on recently, we were understanding something about soil and the mechanisms within the bacteria in soil. And these bacteria, they double every 20 minutes. I mean, can you imagine doubling your income every 20 minutes? I mean, it's just a total different scale of things. But when you look at nature, there's this extraordinary abundance in seeds. I mean, we're working with a hemp plant, and it's the cultivator's course. A single hemp bud can contain, I have it right, it might have been from a plant, but something like 500 million seeds, that it just opens and these just blow out, It only needs one of those to actually fertilize a female hemp plant. I mean, the level of abundance in nature is extraordinary. So how to apply effortless abundance then in a way to actually start to manage monetary flows in a constructive way? Because in our physical reality, a store of energy, it is in a way, it's an artificial store of energy, and it's a representation of stored energy, but it is this money. And this money, which at least used to be some kind of physical component, it was like a piece of gold or something that you had to exchange, which people held some value against, that has switched purely to a mathematician or an accountant's world of just a number in a computer. to back it up. But a mastery of that does empower us at that, working with a focus on consciousness. A mastery of that empowers us in this world. You can get up and you can travel. You can spend your time now on what you want to do. You can spend a few hours here on the work, and you can be multitasking and mixing the different things that you want when you have that kind of capability. So I think it's something that's coming. Well, I believe it's coming on the planet. I think there's another huge wave of abundance coming in this next 10 years on the planet. From some of the estimates that I'm seeing, the expectation is that we're going to be creating in the next 10 years as much wealth in these next 10 years as we have done in the last 100. And we've created some wealth recently. There's been some extraordinary creations coming forward. So a few words then on effortless abundance. The effortless doesn't actually mean, to me, in my experience as I played with it, it doesn't mean just sitting in a chair and being lazy. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not about not putting out energy. The distinction I want to draw there is it is effortless when it is something that you want to do, when you're engaged in a flow of energy. So if you look at a 10-year-old kid with a football on the field, that kid's running after that ball. He wants to score. He's not thinking, oh, this is hard work. Oh, God, have I got to walk another? Oh, I'm running. What am I running? It's not hard work. It's just, you just want to get in there and do it. So there's plenty of energy flowing. You really do want to get that energy flowing. But what I mean by effortless is it's not this having to push it to make it happen. And a good deal of this is it's getting a mindset, it's getting an attitude, it's getting a perspective where you start to realign yourself around that which is possible, this particular perspective, as compared to an alternative perspective. And then these perspectives we choose actually are empowering or disempowering. And I have found that as I've continued to work with this principle of effortless abundance, and particularly then joyfully as Marybeth joined me as a partner, we turned that around slowly from an idea. In other words, it wasn't that I had achieved it, but it was something that I was holding out as a compass needle pointer, if you like. Then it is now that is starting to flow for us very vigorously, very nicely. Let me turn the subject over to the two of you. Peter, your experiences, your thoughts.
So it sounds like what you brought there as well is working with effortless abundance is you setting an intention or a needle pointer, and that's a direction. And when we're in my own experience, when I've been just struggling to survive, and there isn't even an intention to try and bring an ease to it or to necessarily even focus on what I even want. It's just like, I need to survive right now. And there's this rigidity there. And anytime things are involving money, in the past, there's this thing of like, do I want to like burden this other person with this cost or whatever? And like these things had come up. But then there's also an understanding of the fact that money itself isn't like a zero-sum game, that we can all have money and it's just this way of supporting each other, and it's not something that we need to shy away from. And if you're providing a service for someone, it's good for you to be compensated so that you can provide that service to other people if it's actually a good service that you're good at providing. And this this really serves the situation? But it also needs to be something that not only are you good at providing, but it's something that you want to provide. Because if you've ever been served by a customer service provider person who doesn't really want to be there and doesn't really want to provide that service, it is a bit of a like, oh, all right then, thank you, but it's almost jarring. It's like, I don't feel served. And if someone was giving you a massage and didn't really want to touch your body because whatever, like you probably wouldn't come back. So we need to provide services that other people want, but it needs to be something that we want to provide as well, that we're passionate about, and that really allows that to flow, because we're doing things that we want to do, and we're being rewarded for it because we're good at it, because we want to do it. And it's very hard to get good as well at something that you don't want to do, because you're not truly interested in it, so that you wouldn't find out all these interesting little niche things that only you might be interested in about it as well, to expand in that way. Yeah, that's all I have to bring at the moment. Marybeth?
I find this really interesting from both of you, because I've heard the same word a couple times, but I don't think that it's been focused on quite enough yet. And that's the word flow. So when you look at, we've talked about energy flows, and Peter's talked a little bit about the rigidity, or when things are stuck. I think you've used the word stored when it comes to money. My experience in bringing money and spirituality together has been an understanding that money is our currency, which also has a flow to it. A currency is a frequency and energy, right? If you take a different word around it. But money is a caricature of an energy flow. It just simply is energy flowing. And it's intended to continue to flow and to not be stuck and to not be rigid. And when we step into our flows, when we step into our passion, when we feel the energy flowing through us, when we look for the job that not only is good for other people, but it's also the same thing that we want to give from ourselves, when we're giving from the gift who we are, we're flowing energy. And for me, unless we're putting a block to money, to receiving energy, then the money is going to flow. It's going to flow to us, and it's going to flow back out from us. And there doesn't have to be a lot of thought around money. So to me, as soon as you put the thought around, oh, I want to make a lot of money, you've stepped out of natural energy flows. But when you're focusing on what you want to do and the gift that you are and the gift that you bring to the world, you're naturally giving so much energy flow out that the way that it often comes back in this world is in a monetary flow, because that's how we have chosen to express it at this time in life. And I don't know that we always need to do that, but for where we are right now and for how money works, that's a very big part of it. When I hear people who are spiritual and don't have money and don't have those flows, to me it's often more that they don't want to accept money from someone else. They block the flow of money. I don't really feel like there's a lack of money, just like there's not a lack of life force energy to flow through us, just like there's not a lack of pretty much anything when you look in the world and into nature and how abundant it is and how it seeds and flowers and grows and expands. So there's really quite a bit for me in seeing money as an energy flow. So I'll pause there, because that's what I felt like needed to be added to what you both were saying.
Yes, I mean, energy even for those people that have accumulated a great deal of money, it doesn't, for the most part, just sit as a pile of notes under a bed. It needs to be engaged in something. It will be invested in something. It will be held by a bank who's investing it in something. Money moves from hand to hand, and that allows for an exchange of services. But I think that from a spiritual perspective, I think some mastery of money is helpful and probably beneficial for most people. And if you just have no concerns about money and money just flows for you, when you need it and so forth, that's terrific. But I just do see a good number of people who are inhibited on the subject of money. And so there's a desire then, and I think that there's some value in applying spiritual principles, aspects of consciousness, into gaining an awareness of money and gaining an at-easement with the subject of money, such that one can be empowered to do whatever you want, whenever you want to do it. And indeed, that was part of my early definition of abundance. It wasn't having a fixed sum of money. It was that the thing was, can I do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it? And I started to live from that perspective, where I set up my job so that I could run it from anywhere on the planet with an internet connection, which became pretty wide. And so then it would be okay for me to, for instance, go and spend a month or two in Thailand, and I could be working, on my connected device on a beach in Thailand as easily as I could be working, from an office. I could be, I spent a good deal of time traveling, and that was through one of those joyful events that I came to meet dear Marybeth on a cruise ship on the Nile in Egypt. So the ability to do what you want when you want to do it, I think, is also a good way of helping to define abundance. And there is this expectation, I now realize as I have worked more on this, is holding that as an expectation. If you hold it as an expectation that it's not going to happen, or that it's going to be difficult, or that you don't know how to do it, that can be a limitation. And I'd like to put aside now this idea of, say, I don't know how to do it. Because what I'm becoming to understand very much now, it's becoming very obvious in recent months to me, that it's not my job to know how to do it. I have actually come to understand that the energy that sits behind us is looking for people, for spirit forms that can hold thought forms. It's looking for people who have those thought forms to form around it. The energy is absolutely abundant in this universe. If you want to, it seems to me that most of the universes that I've kind of started to play in, they're energetic rather than physical. But physical is condensed energy. We know this. We know that if you take a small amount of energy, you take a few pounds of uranium and convert that back to pure energy, and it creates it can devastate a complete city. Just a few pounds. There's so much energy here. This is in a more frozen format as when it gets actually into the physical. But there's a huge amount of energy available to us, as I'm now understanding it, to call upon and to direct. And that energy contains the know-how of how to build things and how to do things. So it's very much the case that energy is kind of like a genie in a lamp. And we have to start to adjust our attitude to that's the way it is, because holding the attitude that, oh, this is really hard work and it's not going to work for me, and I'm never going to, all of those thoughts, the energy says, okay. And it will form around those thoughts. It will form around those thoughts as easily as it will form around thoughts of abundance. So in some ways it might be counterintuitive, but when you're dealing with survival and survival is threatened, so it might be that you need to get into being very defensive and so forth. But actually, at that time, if a part of you can actually be just thinking about really where you want to go, then energy can line around where you really want to go, rather than around, oh, I've got lots of problems. So we do a lot of trying at this level, when we get stuck in thoughts, oh, it's very, very difficult and so forth, and then we kind of try and cope with that circumstance. And I think I've done a lot there, and then kind of inch by inch, I've allowed myself to, okay, well, I just managed to do that. Okay, I've just managed to come over it. I've just managed. So, and it's a better position than it was, but it's still, work and hard work. But that as I've managed to relax that attitude now, it's a realization that the energy is there to enable things to flow and happen. But as you work with these flows of energy, including starting to treat and recognize energy more as a flow, as Marybeth is saying, you start to work with it as more of an energy flow, then it becomes a lighter and lighter topic. And there becomes an increasing capability to manage things and to have synchronicities happen. So I think that some people some very good friends of mine, quite a few, who have made significant progress looking at the world from a conscious perspective, nevertheless have not really addressed the money one yet. And I think that money one addressed by us could be very, very empowering. And we are turning centuries of slightly negative thought. I mean, the idea was that you were going to be spiritual. Well, what you're going to be? You're going to be a monk and a nun. How much you're allowed to own when you're a monk or a nun? Nice round figure. And then you're dependent upon the bishop, who, strangely enough, sort of had nothing, but he kind of had everything, didn't he? Because he had control over these huge churches and all the feasts and celebrations and everything else. So those guys had managed, stepped into a different level of managing money. But we need to come to move out of this space that there's a limitation, and as we start to hold it differently and hold a different perspective, then life can follow a very different unfolding perspective, which is where you combine all these beautiful things that you've worked out and you've got right, and now you also have the means to actually flow with them and to create your life the masterpiece you prefer.
I think that the metaphor or the words of energy and flow are the key concept behind this, in the sense that in life we can see that there is energy flowing, and if you sort of block a flow of energy, it won't be able to come in, or it will be restricted, and that this needs to be unblocked, and energy needs to be flowed and circulated for things to take place. And what we're trying to create, I think, is access points to enter this flow. And there's more masculine ways of entering that, which is like, well, we need to first address discipline and have financial discipline and all of this stuff. But that also, when addressed, does allow the flow to come, because you're having that discipline, and that allows money to flow in that way. But then it can also be addressed from a more feminine perspective of, well, we need to find out what our passion is, and what we're actually good at, and have an exploration, and that allows a flow as well. And there's flow also coming from, if I'm being given a gift, and do I accept it? And is there a part of me that's like, well, I don't deserve that, or I shouldn't have that because I'm spiritual and I don't want to get attached to things, when actually that's an empowerment. And those who there's monks who like have released everything, but they have like one loincloth, and there's even like parables of these monks, and like they like lose their loincloth and then they like go nuts because like they lost the one thing they had. but actually it's not about physically having the item, it's about the attachment. And in the Bible it says that the love of money is the root to all evil. But that's the attachment to money and having that as your prime motivation. So in manifesting money, if your prime motivation is to manifest the money, maybe that's not so good, because you can't actually enter the flow that we're seeking. But if your prime motivation is whatever your actual desires are, and what you actually want to create, or what you want to bring, and what you want to receive, and all of these things, the money will naturally flow, because it's not about the money. It's not that attachment to it. But in the fact that it's not about the money, that doesn't mean having a resistance against the money equally, because then it's about the money. If you're resisting money, you're equally making it about the money. And then it's not about what's actually going on. You're focused on the money because you have an issue with it. And that too is money being paid attention to, rather than flowing with what we're actually trying to achieve. Equally, there are financial discipline elements that need to exist. Just spending all the money we get immediately means that there's no energy left within us to flow. And if you have loads of energy and you just eject all of it immediately, you have no energy there. So how can you create an energy? So that too comes in as an aspect as well. And I feel that the flow really explains it, because it's a very natural way of thinking about it, because it kind of counts, like any situation can be translated into these words in a way when dealing with this situation. Another question I actually wanted to ask is not only about spiritual people and their relationship to money, but spirituality and like as a business, and that having a price, and what you guys thought about that. Because I told my partner that we will be talking about spirituality and money, and she thought that meant, oh, like spirituality costing money kind of, and as a business. And I was like, oh, we weren't even necessarily thinking about that. But that's a good point you bring up, because that in itself is a whole different ballpark as well.
I think that question you raised there of spirituality and spiritual services and charging is again it can be a challenging area. I know the way that I personally sought to address that, and that has been to take the viewpoint that kind of everything is spiritual. I mean, finding a way to exchange with people, not just on spiritual, but with very practical things, be it food, or be it some service, or some valuable contribution that I can make into somebody's life, could be spiritual or non-spiritual by label, but it's all there's a whole spiritual interchange going on here. Personally, I have sought then to deliver services which are, you could say, are more conventional, and I have applied spiritual principle into how to build that business. So it's not specifically selling a spiritual service, but it has been selling services that empower people. In that sense, it's been, you could call it spiritual. And then for that, I've been able to work with normal kind of commercial type of principles. And then from the abundance that generates, I have been then able with Marybeth to begin to kind of set up an environment that can support people who, for instance, wish to put on spiritual events. So now out of that abundance or flow, we can generate a space, for instance, here in our home, we have center where people do host spiritual events. We are not seeking to make money from that at all. That is kind of supported. But see, the exchange, part of the exchange that comes in from that, there's money, but another form of exchange which is extremely valuable is appreciation. So if you can offer something that generates within people a sense of appreciation, we become the beneficiaries of that sense of appreciation, and we feel good about ourselves. And also, when an energy flow of appreciation is set up and people, joyfully feeling uplifted, exploring spiritual principle, then, excuse me, it sets up an energy flow in the space. And that energy flow doesn't dissipate immediately as soon as people go. So when looking at that whole sphere of abundance, it's not putting money on every individual component. And it's probably that one of the components you're engaged in might be the more predominant tap by which so-called money comes through. But other things that you're working on will indirectly help that flow. So that's the way I've addressed it. So I've worked to have strength in a particular industry, to have a skill which is valuable in that conventional sense, while also running spiritual alongside. And then I have applied spiritual principle into the development of the regular business. And for instance, one of the things you can apply spiritual principle very directly to in relation to a conventional business is the management of relationships. Now, people now, service has improved, but it's mostly improved because people found that they were losing money by delivering unpleasant services, And people have learned that actually if you do deliver better services, if you take better care of people, then guess what? They come back. So people have a monetary motive for doing it, but also there's purely the spiritual principle. Do you want to be engaged in a group of people who just feel, uplifted when they connect with you? So if you can deliver a service, and that could be in almost any job line you like. I mean, I can remember working in a role many years ago where I was a consultant that used to go into this business 3 days a week. And I would always get there early. I'd be there on the days I was going in. I'd be there about an hour before everybody else, and I'd be getting things sorted out and working out, lined up. But then when they started to come in, I'd be there and I'd make each of them a cup of tea. Everybody, it wasn't a huge business, I couldn't. But I was the kind of early coffee maker. Well, now of course that's a whole profession, isn't it? Because it's seen that that's a valuable service. And people come in and immediately they'd just be in a good mood, and everybody be laughing and smiling, and then we get on. So there'd be like an energy lift right from the start. So to me, that's an application of spiritual principle into practical business, which then improves attitudes and allows further money to flow meaningfully. Also, of course, it gets you a better job offers and other things. People, when you're around, they pay you more if they, in that kind of an environment.
I think it's a really key point to really consider this word spirituality and what does that really mean? Because I like what you're doing with the interweaving it really into everything else. You can be a very spiritual person and do a very material job, and you can call it being paid for spirituality because of how you hold it and just who you are and what you're doing. This piece about holding spirituality separately, like it's something separate than the physical, I think that has caused us and continues to cause us a lot of problems. So people who are trying to be spiritual, are trying to wake up, think that they have to have a certain type of job and they have to find a way to get paid for it to prove that they're spiritual almost. And I think that that's probably not where we're really going. And I also think that there's a lot of different things in the world, spirituality being one of them, where I don't think that we as a society yet value it enough. So not willing to pay enough for it, for what it's actually worth. And there are quite a few things, you know, outside of spirituality that are like that as well. So, you know, as you ask this question from a monetary perspective, I feel like as a society, as a globe even, that we have a lot of work to do in revamping the flows, re-looking at what is valuable and how we want to show that by the money that comes through. It's a very deep subject. A lot of different threads, a lot of different ways, you know, we could go down to go looking at that. And it's a big question that you asked. Does that answer what you were looking for? How do you feel about the spirituality and money in the way that question was asked?
So I like what you said, in that it almost hinted towards something that I feel, which is that not everybody is a spiritual teacher. And because you mentioned that some people, when you get interested in spiritual things, you need to get a job that's in alignment with that. Whereas actually a very spiritual person can have an entirely material job. Yeah. You could be just a really good plumber with just doing just a plumber, right? But that's not just a plumber. You're just doing a really good job that's very valuable to society. And then your spiritual practice is it's completely a personal thing. It's not something that's meant to be seen. It's something that's done unseen within. And that's vital. And yeah, not everybody needs to be a spiritual teacher. Those that are spiritual teachers, it's a calling, and it's not so much that they went out trying to be spiritual teachers and advertise themselves as such. It's that this naturally just, people came and people listened, and it just sort of happened. But not everybody's calling is to be a spiritual teacher. Definitely. And another thing comes to mind, which is where responsibility is abdicated, opportunity luck. So there's opportunities everywhere that are just completely in the material world, not becoming a spiritual teacher. But just even in a normal job where nobody's in the morning making any copies or anything, but Rick sees that and he's like, you know what? I'm going to be that spunky dude in the morning that's just like, yeah, here, have some coffee, have some smiles, have some cheers. Let's start the day good, let's start it fresh, and let's get going, and let's keep it that way. And like, there's no need to, also in business, like, or if you're in a company, seeing other people and you're like, oh, these people are so not spiritual and whatever. Where actually that this is a deeply spiritual experience because it's human, and that's what spirituality is all about. And bringing that into the workplace and bringing the vibration you want to bring, not being like, oh my god, I'm empathing and I'm feeling everybody's feelings, and like, why can't they just like sort themselves out? No, you're there to bring that, because they don't even see that things are totally awry. They don't see that. It seems normal. The reason you're seeing that is because that is what you're able to bring forward. That's the change that you see in this world. So you don't need to run away from your job necessarily. You can just bring a different spark into it. And I love what Rick said, because I really agree as well, is that businesses require spiritual principles. You can't actually run a business anymore without spiritual principles. It used to be something that you could do. It used to be that, I mean, certain spiritual principles always have to be there, but the efficacy or the fairness or these kinds of things were just not really necessary. Whereas at the moment, thanks to social media as well, everything is on show, everything is on view, and the demand from the consumer at the moment is ethical products that have come in a responsible way. And when that gets seen to not be the case, it gets exposed, and quickly the demand for that product just dies. And it's not that the demand for the product dies, it's just that somebody else is going to fill that hole with a product that doesn't just come from a responsible way. And over time, business is really moving into a place where it's going to be very sustainable, and not just sustainable, but the whole ethics and the principles behind the business strategy and the whole business as a whole and the relationships within the business, they're going to be deeply spiritual or harmonious, if we want to call it that way. Because if they aren't, people will see it and it will get exposed and it will just get boycotted. And not because like people are boycotting it, but just because people are like, I don't want to participate in that one. And that's just happening very naturally. And it's just, it looks like chaos at the moment, but it's really good. we got to cull those businesses are just being culled that are just not in alignment with human values, because people can actually see what's going on as well. Yeah.
I think as a general principle, there's something that really I would want to add around money and abundance, and that is that excuse me, that we do have this massive wave of abundance coming in, and the abundance is it's not necessarily in monetary format. When in the process of moving away from money, it's like money's been an intermediate level. We've had to have some means of exchange to enable groups to kind of get together to kind of make things. So money has actually served humanity to get us to a certain point. But as we move forward, the tremendous value that we're building is actually in knowledge and the ability to disseminate that knowledge. I mean, if you look at the value, say, of a human body, because incredible value is in the DNA chains that are then actually able to create from those plans the whole engineering works that can generate all these precise chemicals in the right places and in the right way. And the body doesn't do that through having to work really hard day and night and being exhausted by the age of 5 months old. It's a natural kind of engagement where energy can connect to the principles of knowledge that are held in a DNA change, and so energy starts to impact and flow through that, and this whole thing just grows. As in nature, the same way simply a rose grows, opens in beauty and magnificence. And the quote from the Bible about the lilies in the field and how in their glory, they were displayed in greater glory than all Solomon's wealth. So it's as we connect into that kind of knowledge level, then our ability to create things on demand is going up and up and up. And as that happens, then the need to have money to pay for them becomes increasingly less. I mean, we now have tremendous knowledge available through, something simple thing like a little phone, a little thing you hand around. But this is totally new. These didn't exist in the same way 20 years ago. And that makes available to us this incredible knowledge. But that knowledge is expanding. It's building on itself. We take that knowledge, it's miniaturized into small devices and small mechanisms, and then it requires only a very small amount of energy to flow through to enable something to grow and flourish. So future times, I think, are going to show this most incredible abundance where our fundamental needs are now being met through the knowledge and the automation of systems. And we are going to, as a people, we're going to be inspired by being invited to look precisely at that which inspires us. What inspires you? You know, where would you like to contribute? You're here. What would you like to do? What would make you feel really good? And so, in a sense, money is going through a transformationary period. And I think people haven't quite caught up with that yet to realize this trend that is happening. Numbers just get bigger and bigger. I mean, we used to think that you know, £1 million was a huge sum of money, and so it was. I think in the days of my dad, he bought this beautiful house that's now sells at, for instance, over £1 million. We bought it for about £2,000 in that time. So the numbers just get bigger and bigger, and so there's a lot of this kind of energy in the system and available to us. Having some awareness of it, being able to summon it, having a good relationship with money, a good attitude towards money, allows it to flow to us and through us more easily. But also there is this overall trend where I think money, the importance of money, is about to go through a reduction in its value. And I'm seeing more and more people engaged in principles of where they want to contribute into society, where they want to empower humanity in different areas, and to be able to bring great benefit to humanity. In fact, by actually taking the services that people are selling, for instance, if I have a service and it's charging X hundred, let's say, for that, and if my attitude has become, well, how can I deliver that instead of X hundred? I can deliver that at X 10, you know, a tenth of that. How can I do that? And you think, well, do you want to sell it for less because you might make less money? Well, that's not the thinking these days. But all expansionary thinking is, okay, how can I deliver that service for a tenth of what people are currently paying? Of course, if I can, there's going to be a lot more people who can afford it, and there'll still be huge sums, you know, that can potentially flow to me. So we're at a time of very beautiful change, and it's good to manage one's attitude towards money, and I think moving away from that, money is the root of all evil. Also, evil is like a bad thing. Recognize that money has served us, and by holding a different attitude towards it ourselves, we could feel better, and we can feel better in our relationship with money.
A word that comes to mind as well with what you're saying is minimalism. Because as you're saying that, I'm almost envisioning a future where, I mean, how many things does each person need? You just need like a space that's your own, and the sort of daily necessities. But like, there's no need for like loads of stuff. And like gardening tools, that we could, as a community, have this big shed where we all just have gardening tools, and no one needs like new gardening tools all the time. You just get what you need, and it can totally be done. And like washing machines, we've like innovated washing machines so much, and they're so complicated now, but they're like no better than the old washing machines. You could just have one standardized washing machine on the planet and just have interchangeable parts. And like, there's no need for all these excess overcomplications when we have like on the planet enough furniture for like 10 planets that's just in warehouses. We've created a lot of things that you can't almost make it better. It's been made, and we've got it, and we've created this level of comfort that's just available if we distribute it appropriately. And really, it's all about having, what do you want to contribute, and because you have everything you need and your needs are met. So what do you actually want to do? What do you actually want to create? And there's enough space on this planet for everyone to be doing what they want to do actually and what they want to create. But that really brings to mind something that a friend said to me, and she was really actually asked me, and I actually know how to answer this question, so I'm also asking it to you guys. She actually asked me, she basically agrees with what we're talking about, but she's stuck with the fact that I actually don't know what I want, because my whole life I've never, I just thought I was stupid, and I would get distracted by things, and like anytime somebody else was telling me about their passion, I'd be like, oh wow, that's amazing, I want to do stuff, I want to do that, but that's not her passion, and quickly that just, like, the steam dies out, because it's not actually her interest or passion. How does somebody find their interest and their passion so that they can actually go in that direction? Because, like, almost all of this is almost irrelevant if you can't actually find your own direction.
Well, that's a powerful question.
Yeah, it's one with probably all of us have played with at one point or another. If we haven't yet, we will start to. I think the answer to that is somewhat the same as how you create effortless abundance in your life. You start to set the intention. Start to set the intention for knowing what I want. You start to set give me ideas. I mean, you know, like this friend who can listen to different people and get drawn into the different passions. Maybe what this person really wants is to explore a lot of different things for a while. Maybe there isn't the one thing that we have to do or we have to be, or maybe it can change on a whim for some of us, and for other people it can last for 10 years that we want the same thing. I think the looking for the one thing that we're supposed to do is a lot like the looking for the one truth that we all looked for so long. There's not a one truth, but I don't think there's a one truth within most of us either. There are some people that are very dedicated and very focused and do know exactly what they want to do. Or there are people, you know, like you said, with spiritual teachers who just kind of, you know, are called into that, and that's what they do. But when you're at a point where you're looking for something that you don't have an attunement or a magnetism to it or a draw to it yet, it's really, to me, it's got that same process behind it. Just start asking the question and see what comes to you. Because as soon as you ask a question, answers start to flow to you if you stay in the same place and to hear them when they land.
To put some additional words behind that as well, in the way that I see it, that slightly engineering kind of viewpoint that I tend to hold of things. From this level, there is this ability to ask. It is this level, it is the level behind, the energy behind, that has the know-how and can start to form things and shape things. At this level, I'm understanding now increasingly that even every cell in a body has some kind of awareness of what it prefers and what it doesn't from its existence. At each level of consciousness has that some degree of indication of what it prefers and what it doesn't. And the way the whole construct is set up, as I'm perceiving it now, in a greater clarity than I ever have before, is that the energy is there to respond to those wishes. And so evolution is something that naturally happens, where every life force aspect is calling for that which it particularly wants, calling for its focus. And I think that if there isn't a clarity on what you want, one can fall back on values. So you say, okay, there isn't something like material that I can identify, or even a particular job. And I say, well, would you like to feel good? And you say, oh, well, yes, of course I do. Okay, so you want to feel good? Yeah, okay, see, well, let's start just calling in feeling good. I'd like to feel good. So energy, show me things that might possibly help me to feel good. And if you keep it as general as that, then you can start to notice as well your response to different things. How did you respond today, meeting these people as opposed to meeting other people? This is another key question that has value. I heard it said by a business coach of mine. He said that people tend to be the average of the 5 people they spend the most time with. Okay, so what I'm going to suggest there is that if you are looking for inspiration, then can you connect with a group that is looking for inspiration? Because when you're with other people who have that attitude, then more ideas can land. You get a kind of vortex of energy that is drawn, and you can start to fire ideas off each other. You're spending time with people who have no interest in ideas and think that nothing can really change and so forth. It's going to be harder to make that to make that breakthrough. So I think, anybody who's watching this is going to be someone who is interested in change. So, what groups can you connect with? And that particular search led me to work with somebody who's my current kind of business coach, who brings a lot of inspiring information across to me, presenting me with inspiration from many different industries, extraordinary things that are being accomplished. And he encourages people to think in terms of an MTP, massively transformative purpose. If you had a massively transformative, if there's something you really could transform on this planet, what would it be? Well, that in a way is aiming at perhaps the higher end of something. But as you start to focus on that idea, even at a simple level, so how can I bring more inspiration into my daily life? How can I bring more joy into my daily life? And the fun thing is you don't have to answer the question. You just have to ask it. Because it's the job of the energy to come and help empower us. It will bring ideas and possibilities. It will bring synchronicities. So if people could understand that the energy will respond. Marybeth says, you ask the question, and the energy will respond. But if you have the attitude that it's going to, and no one's going to listen to you, that's difficult, because you've just programmed the energy to make sure that you're not important and it's not going to listen to you. So that one does need to shift. You need to give this a chance. You need to think, okay, there's some energy here that will respond to me, and if it will, let me try it at least. Let me try this kind of attitude give it a run for a month. And then it builds. You build with some successes. You notice that 1 or 2 successes here and there, and then you kind of pour a bit more water on those. And then as you're looking for successes, then you start to build a track record of successes. And there comes a point where suddenly and someone could come and start to try to persuade you, how bad life is and how things don't work out and how things go wrong for everybody and so forth. Well, you're going to have a hard time with Marybeth, I'm afraid. I used to try and persuade her on a number of occasions, a number of things that weren't going right, and it didn't work. That was hard work. She's not interested because she was already stable. And I understand that kind of point of stability now. Somebody can come to me and talk to me, of depressing news and difficulties. As my business coach would point out, he said the world's biggest problems are actually the greatest business opportunity. If there's a huge problem in the world and you can come up with an answer, you're a billionaire, pal. You look at it from a different perspective and, start to take ownership of how you can bring ideas into bringing, an energy flow into making circumstances and situations better. And you can improve everything in your life. You can get a little lift here, a little lift there, a little lift there. Like the kind of the legs of a stool sometimes. It's not just a case of, bringing one leg up and ignoring the others. You work on, lifting the whole thing, and then the kind of plateau of your level of enjoyment of life can start to steadily rise.
Well, those answers are really good. They covered quite a lot. I liked how Marybeth began with the fact that it doesn't have to be one interest. We're multidimensional beings. We can do multiple things. And maybe for some people, it will resonate to just focus really intensely on one thing. But not everybody is interested in the level of sacrifice that requires as well, because then you so many other things to do and to explore, and we can do many things. And also sometimes we'll go in one direction and we'll almost lose interest in it at one point, and then we'll go and explore another direction and another, and then we might regain an interest for an initial direction. And when you go back to that, you've now attained new perception through the different journeys you've done. So when you go back to that, you go with fresh eyes and you look at it anew, and you have this totally new inspiration about it as well. And just that freedom to explore. And that comes from saying that, I don't know, but I want to find out. And asking questions is really the beginning of finding out, because if your door isn't open to even asking the questions, you can't really find out how to, and as Rick said, like, what do you actually want though? Do you want like some money, or do you want to be happy? Or do you want to have a particular feeling? And that's really what it's about, like bringing that in and asking, how do I actually get there? And who am I actually spending time with most of all? And what are they doing? What are they focusing on? And like, well, how is that influencing me? What are the behavior patterns that I'm picking up on? And because if their doors are closed, I'm sure as hell not going to be reminded on a daily basis to reopen my own. Because, well, reminders, we all wake up and fall asleep every day. Like, we need to be reawakened and reminded. So we have our circle of individuals. And another piece of advice there, if anyone's interested, is that your environment influences you. And if you get an insight or a personal message, you can always just write it down on a piece of paper. Maybe draw a flower next to it, make it beautiful, put it on your wall. And now your wall isn't just a wall, but it's a reminder, a permission slip to feel back into that feeling that you found. And we can create our own environment, and our environment does influence us, but we can influence it to influence us better. And then that becomes stronger and stronger. And then we can be in a place of strength where we go back, and somebody that in the past we would have been like, yeah, let's chill with this person, and we can just resonate and complain with them about life for like half an hour. Such a good talking point. Whereas now we see them and we go, no, because this is so much nicer. and have that sort of strength of perception, as Richard was talking about, that he saw in Marybeth, that I'm sure he holds himself as well. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Beautiful. Very well. I think maybe we're moving to a good place for wrapping up this evening. And it's been I think, interestingly inspired chat, actually. So thank you very much, Marybeth. Thank you very much, Peter. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and for anybody who possibly takes an interest and gets to view it, I hope you find it interesting. And so thank you to everybody.
Thank you both for the way in which these things come about. The twists and turns are always unexpected, but it just kind of, oof, so nice. And I hope that whoever's watching this feels that and feels what we're sharing and is excited, not necessarily even about what we're doing, but is inspired. Maybe they saw a different version or way from what we were doing, and a different perception is inspired. Not necessarily them to share in our own, but to find their own.